What is going on, you guys? It is late at night. It's like 11 o'clock right now. But this is the same day, same night as the crank polishing video. And the reason why we polished the crank was because we're assembling this motor right here. So I'm gonna give you guys a quick little rundown on what's happening in this room, my cousin's room, Daniel, if you guys don't know. He is building his, I guess, new motor for this season pretty much, because we've already done a lot with the stock LSV that's in his car now. So let's flip this over real quick and show him what we have going on here. So right here we have a CSS B18B1, which originally was this guy, right? And then he got a good deal on the sleeve motor, so then he pretty much said, hey, if you want it, here you go. And this is a CSS cylinder support system pressed in by Jeff over there at CNC Works, I believe in Florida. And this just came back from the machine shop at Victory Machining out here where we're at. They did an incredible job. They cleaned it really nice. They decked the block. They bored it out. It went 82, unfortunately, because this block was sitting outside and the rust kind of ate the cylinder walls a little bit. So he did originally have 81.5 pistons right here, right, CPs, and because we had to go 82, we opt for some Super Techs, which works perfectly fine. We've ran them plenty of times before, and now this block is 82 mil. Now the highest horsepower 82 mil that CSS has is like 1,000 horsepower. So what we're trying to do, this will be perfectly fine. Everything is laid out right here. We got the rings all pre-gapped from the machine shop. Shout out to Victory for doing that. We didn't expect them to, but they did. It is gapped for like moderate turbo nitrous supercharged build. So they are all ready to go. We have Super Tech pistons, 82. We have, what bearings are these? ACL. These are ACLs, and we had to opt for ACLs because the King bearings were back ordered for a very good minute, so we just kind of offered these, and we ran them before, have no issues with them. And we're going to be running Skunk 2 rods. This is an Ellis block, Ellis crank, Ellis rods. So everything else is here. We got the mains, the rods, thrust. So I'm pretty much just gonna hand the camera over to my cousin, actually on the tripod, and he's gonna assemble it. Pretty much like just the main important things. There are certain things that we're not gonna show you, like filing rings down, because it's already done. If you guys want to see a more thorough, in-depth, I did rebuild my ITR. I'll put a little link on top right here or over here, whichever side it is on. And pretty much the goal tonight is to get this full rotating assembly assembled.
Alright, so like Dana said, we are doing the build tonight. It's a motor that I'm putting into my car, which is a right-hand drive EK sedan, and I've been planning this build for quite a long time. Finally got everything that I need. There is a second portion to this build, which you guys will find out shortly, but for now we're focusing on the motor. So what I'm about to do right now is, as I'm building this, I'm also teaching Tyga, because he has a B20 that we plan to rebuild, and I want him to do it because we're all about teaching each other and helping each other progress. So what we're doing right now is we already checked the rings. They are good. Just double check from Victory. Regardless, even though they said that they did gap it, I always want to double check, make sure they are within tolerance. And sure enough, 1 through 4 are. So I just got done explaining to Pick here the bearings. So these are the main bearings, and I was explaining to him that there's 5 sets. 1 for the block side, 1 for the main side, and you can't mess them up because they do have notches. There's a little nipple right there, and that goes on the block side, because you can see here there's a little notch. So all you gotta do, line it up, boom, seated. So that's 1. And then on the main cap side, the notches is in the middle, right there. It's right in the middle. On all the main caps, the notch is right there in the middle. Just push down on the other end so it comes up, just like that. So just like the engine block, there's a notch. This one's in the middle. So you grab the bearing with the notch in the middle. There's a notch right there. I like to seat it in the notch first, and then just press it straight down. Make sure everything's seated. That's how you do bearings for mains. So now we're gonna get the plastic dip. Said it again. Plastic gauge, and we're gonna lay it right here on each of the journals. So you don't need a lot. Literally, you don't need a lot. So you're putting one on all of the journal for the mains. So there should be 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we got the plastic gauge on the journal. You can see a little green thing right there. It's literally all you need. And then what's gonna happen is when you put the main caps on, you torque it down the way you would torque it down once you finally assemble it. So 2 steps. I forget what the torque is. I'm gonna look it up in a bit. But you put your main caps on, torque them down, and once you torque them down, take them back off, and then this little plastic gauge is gonna smush, and you use this here and you measure it to see where it lines up.
So we got all the main cap bolts removed and all the caps loosened up. So we're going to go ahead and just check them right now and see where we stand with the plastic gauge. So you wanted to be where on this one?
About 15 thou.
So where is it at?
15 thou.
Yeah, it looks like it's right on 15 thou, right there.
Yeah.
Where's this at?
15 thou.
15?
Yeah.
A trick that Noma's Industry told me how to get these plastic gauge off is to use a credit card or some brake cleaner in a rag. It'll work too. But we're gonna get these all cleaned up real quick, guys, and then we're gonna go ahead and put some assembly lube and get this crank put into place and re-torque back down to specification of 2 steps, 22 and 50 what? 56 for Nella's block.
Look at that mechanic, dog.
Mr. Pictora Chan, aka Tiger, is learning, guys. And this is the thing that we do in our group, is that if we can teach, we will teach. Tiger, you learned something today?
Yeah. I can show you better, I can tell you.
Now, before the crank goes in, guys, definitely got to install your thrust washers to prevent that crank walk. I mean, if the crank wants to sea walk, I'm not going to stop it from sea walking, but thrust washer number 1. Now thrust washer number 2. Once you get your bearings all nice and lubricated with assembly lube, go ahead and set your crank in place. Now that you have your crank in place, go ahead and reinstall the main caps with lubrication on the bearings to ensure we have lubrication to spin the crank when we are installing the rods and pistons. So once you get all of the main caps torqued down to specification, the crank should spin freely. And freely, I mean by hand. Spin it by your hand real quick. Orale. That's what's up. So I guess next step from here, guys, is
assembling the pistons and rod.
Hell yeah, brother.
Took me quite a while to figure out how to install the snap ring for the super tight piston. Pretty much piston, rod, wrist pin. So there's a notch, just like the block. The rod has a notch that faces the exhaust side, and the bigger valve relief on the piston faces the intake side. Literally in, and then wrist pin in. But I'm gonna use some assembly lube on the wrist pin so that way it goes in nice and easy. Alright, so it's the next day and Dana's not here, so I'm just recording this for him. So last night when we were installing the wrist pin, we noticed that they were not right. So this is the wrist pin. These 4 here came with the Super Tech pistons that we ordered, and once we installed them, we realized that they were a bit shorter and the rods sat in there a bit looser. So we reached out to our tuner and our buddy Simon at Nomis Industry, and they confirmed that they are not the right wrist pins. And luckily for us, they did have a set of Super Tech pistons that were melted, and the wrist pins in there were still good. So we pulled them out, compared it to the one that came, and as you can clearly see, it is definitely shorter. And you probably can't tell, but the thickness of it is also a little thicker. So I already test fitted one of the wrist pin into the Super Tech pistons that I have, and they fit perfectly snug, so I'm pretty confident that they will work. We did try the CP piston wrist pin that I have, and also the Sub-Nipon turbo pistons that I have, and the wrist pins did fit. However, they are longer, blocking the seating for the circlip, so they were not usable. So now what I'm gonna do is just assemble the rest of the pistons, and once we get the pistons and rods connected, then we're gonna drop them into the block, and then we are going to check the tolerance to make sure that they're within spec. And in an earlier clip we did show how to use the plastic gauge, so let's get to it. Alright, now that I have all the rods connected to the pistons, I separated the rod caps because now it's time to install the bearings. Alright, so I got all 4 pistons and rods connected into the crank. I did do plastic gauge check on all 4. They're all within tolerance, and I looped them up, torqued them all down, and as you can see, the motor spins about the turn of a hand. So I actually took a break to get something to eat. I was kind of starving. While I was eating, I soaked this rear housing for the rear main seal in some oven cleaner, and then scrubbed it off using some water and a toothbrush, and it came out really nice. I replaced the rear main seal with a new seal that I got from National. Oh, National brand. I ordered it off of Rock Auto. I also got the oil pan gasket, water pump, timing belt, tensioner kit, gates. Oil pump is on, and I was able to get the windage tray on. However, the oil pickup wouldn't fit. It's a bit too short. This might not be for this block, so I have to find the correct one, get it mounted. Once the oil pickup tube goes on, then the oil pan can go on. 4:42 Saturday morning AM, March 28th. And I'm trying to decide if I want to do the timing belt, water pump, tensioner right now, or just call it a night. Yeah, I'm kind of tired, but the motor's pretty much there. So Alrighty guys, day 3. So last night I ended up putting the water pump on. However, I was not able to do the tensioner because I do not have the bolt for it. And the oil pump was the wrong one. I did pick that up today from Dana's. He did have the correct one I needed. So that's now on and it's in place, secured. So we do have a couple blocks inside our storage that does have the tensioner bolt that I need. And then also I do have a pulley, but I don't have the woodruff key. So I'm not going to be installing that today or the tensioner today because unfortunately our storage closed early. So unfortunately today, the only thing I was able to get done is the oil pickup. Progress is better than no progress. We are going to go on to a day 4 of this motor build, which is actually a lot longer than I was intending it to be. Should have been done the first day. However, I was trying to teach Tyga how to build a motor, which took a little bit longer, and then we came across the whole wrist pin ordeal. And then after wrist pin, everything else was assembled to the best of my abilities because I was unable to do the rest of the stuff because I do not have it. So a little backstory on this block, it actually came from Tyga himself. He had sent it in to CSS to get done, and when he did that, he had removed all of the components and he had it set aside in his garage, and his dad threw everything away. Luckily, the main caps were still there. So that's good. That's the main thing that we needed. Everything else can be replaced, which is what I am doing right now, is sourcing all the nuts and bolts that I need to complete this motor, which is not a big deal because we do have a bunch of block laying around, but I was just being stubborn and not trying to go to the storage and rip apart a block. So we were trying to source it in Dana's garage with all the nuts and bolts that we had spare. And most of the bolts were off of the other CSS block that is no good, so we used that as a donor, but that as well was missing some bolts. So now it's just coming down to finding the rest of the bolts, which is literally just the tensioner and a woodruff key, and then everything can be fully assembled. I can put the timing belt on, the tensioner on, the timing cover on, the crank pulley on, and pretty much the block is done. All right. Day 4 of this engine building process, and I was able to go to the storage and gather everything else I needed. So I got the tensioner bolt here. I needed a timing cover, which I pulled off of a spare block that we are not going to be using, and then my timing belt, tensioner, all ready to go on. And then that's pretty much it. I don't have an oil pan. Tyga does have one that I'm gonna temporarily put it on, just, you know, throw it on there without the gasket, maybe a bolt or two just to hold it in place. And then once the motor in my car comes out with the bung on my oil pan, we're gonna take that and then permanently mount it with the new Fail Pro oil pan gasket. And this block is pretty much done. All right, just like that. Got the tensioner on with the bolt. Got the timing belt routed. Pulleys put on. Woodruff keys in. And everything's pretty much done. All I need now is just get the oil pan from Tyga, slap it on. But the motor is pretty much done. And a wise man once told me, keep a clean workspace and everything will go smooth. And this time around, my second time building a motor, I made sure I kept everything clean. I had this bag that came with the block when it came from the machine shop, laid it out over my desk, had everything laid out, piston, rod, rings, everything laid out, the tools I needed. I had it set on one side, and to be honest, it was very helpful to keep it clean, just in general, not just motor building, but when you're working on cars, keeping all your tools organized and knowing where everything is at just makes your life that much easier. And because I kept everything clean, once I was done put all my tools back into my little bag. All I did was just folded up this plastic bag I had covered with all the stuff that I didn't need, and that was my cleanup process. Table's back to being empty, put my laptop back there, and the motor is pretty much assembled. When the time comes and we're gonna swap it in, obviously got a 82 JE Pro Seal head gasket that's gonna go on there. Gonna pull the ARP studs out of my LS block now, throw them on here, Type R head goes on, put everything assembled, and it'll be ready to drop into the car. Hopefully make some power. I am pretty confident that the motor will be fine. I did build the motor that's in my brother's Integra. The car has been running ever since we swapped it in. Car been on a dyno, been down the track, and he's enjoying the car right now. There's definitely nothing wrong with it, so I'm pretty confident this motor is going to be the same. But this is going to be for me, so I did take a little extra time on it, make sure I got everything right and cleaned everything up. So now it's just gotta assemble the rest of it and put it into the car.